Hi everybody, thank you so much for joining me again here on my channel. For those of you who've come across from our Wanderlust channel, I appreciate that too, and I appreciate you coming in and listening to my thoughts. Today I just wanted to talk about a little something that I think about fairly regularly, I guess, because as a dad, I've got a 7-year-old daughter, obviously as a husband to my wife. I consider the safety of Singapore, for women in particular, quite regularly. Back in 2014 actually, when Millie had her first ever visit here to Singapore. She'd been out with my sister somewhere and she was travelling back on the MRT on her own with Milo, and it was kind of late at night. It was getting close to 11, I think, and she talks about this moment where there was a bunch of teenage guys who came onto the train. Milo was kind of getting fussy, it was late, and she suddenly felt really unsafe because a load of teenage boys had clocked that she was there on her own with a baby. He was only just one, and they made a beeline for her. They started walking towards her, and she talked about feeling kind of uneasy, and then all of a sudden these lads getting down on their knees and like playing with Milo and cheering him up and making him feel friendly before they then just kind of went off the next stop. And it really, really impacted her at that moment. She suddenly realised the culture here in Singapore is actually completely different to how it had been in the UK. For those of you who aren't sure about the UK, I guess like for us, there's been some really, really high profile, unsafe points over the last year or two. The one that comes to mind immediately is the Sarah Everard case, where she ended up getting into a car with a police officer who was off duty, and was tragically her life was taken, and there was a huge investigation around that, and then a huge movement actually of women in the UK and globally beyond that, just highlighting how unsafe they feel on the streets. And recently this has provoked a conversation for me that I've had with lots of different girls we know in Singapore here, and also with people my mother-in-law and my sister-in-law are visiting at the moment. My mother-in-law has very much a very safe environment in the UK. She lives in the east, in the county of Norfolk, and out of the city centre. She lives in a town called North Walsham, and she talked about how it is quite safe, and she feels that while she still feels that community is quite safe, here in Singapore she felt totally uncomfortable, like yesterday, with leaving her bag at the table, just a chopa table. We were at Marina Bay Sands. It was super busy. We were there at the shops. There's a food court there, and there are people of different from different cities from all around the world. Yet we felt that it was safe enough to put our bags there while we went and looked for food, and we got in queues, and we probably left our bags alone for 10 minutes or so while we were looking for food, trusting that the system in which we live in here in Singapore was going to keep our things safe. And she felt that that was quite uncomfortable for her, but she realised that we felt comfy with it, so she did too. My sister-in-law, in a contrast, has lived all over the world, who has pretty much been travelling for the last 10-11 years, and feels that Singapore is by far the safest place for her. And I asked her a few questions about it this morning too, and she talked about how in particular men don't stare. They don't make her feel uncomfortable, that she might be unsafe for any reason. And I thought that was a really, really interesting point too. She has just recently finished her travels in Mexico, and she mentioned that one morning she got up early to go and take a train somewhere, and she couldn't remember where the train station was, and she felt unsafe because there were a lot of people who were drug users who are still out from the night time, where I guess things are the vices of life tend to dominate at night time. And she felt very unsafe then. She noticed that people were staring at her, and she had to consider where she would go if she was approached. My wife, Millie, when we were living in Norwich in the east of England, before we got married, Millie would sometimes walk home at the end of the evening. She would walk home. She lived probably about a 10 or 15 minute walk away, but we would stay on the phone throughout her whole journey because she didn't necessarily feel safe walking back on her own. She said if she passed people or was aware that there was a guy, however many meters behind her, she would be looking around for houses with their lights on, and she would know that that would be the one that she'd run to knock on the door. I find it really interesting that, and sad actually, that women are having to consider this just in everyday life in different countries and different cities. We feel very privileged that our daughter Aspen gets to grow up here and gets to grow up in an environment where she constantly feels safe. We do kind of already, I mean, she's only 7, but we're already looking ahead to the future when she might travel on her own, or she might want to go and visit the UK and see family on her own, and whether we would prepare her properly for what life would be like. And it's actually such a shame that we have to prepare her for the unsafety of other cities, of other countries. And I guess I wanted to get a discussion going. I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to find out more about what it is that makes people feel safe here in Singapore. I know for sure, I've noticed, and since the Sarah Everard stuff in the UK, I've felt very, very aware that if I'm on my way home from work, even from like 6, 7 o'clock at night, and there's just a single girl or lady in front of me even walking back to the same apartment block where we live, that I would make sure that I kept my distance, that I wouldn't try to catch the gate as it shuts for her. I would just let her kind of walk ahead, and I'd slow down. I would normally at those points, I guess, be walking a bit faster. And having heard of the stories since that Sarah Everard case, I've made a conscious decision to hold back, to walk slower. I don't know. I find it funny. I think it's good that we're trying to make sure that women feel safe. But I feel like, what is it about a culture where women don't feel like it's a safe thing? Here in Singapore, there's no catcalling. People don't tend to stare at each other. Sophie, my sister-in-law, talked very much about being in other cities and feeling unsafe when men in particular were staring at her. She talked about the contrast between India and Nepal. She said in India she felt very much that men would stare. Sometimes it might be because of her, the fact that she is white, that she's Caucasian and very rare to be seen in those areas, but she felt that crossing the border into Nepal, there was definitely no eye contact. It was looking down. And so cultures kind of add to that, I guess, as well. Overall, here in Singapore, there is a culture of safety. There's a culture of honour and respect. Some people who are maybe outward looking in might consider that to be fear, because of the way that the government punish. There's still corporal punishment here. The way that the governments punish people who steal or who commit crimes. And there's definitely a deterrent in the harshness of the punishments, but I don't see it as out there as a do the wrong stuff and this is the punishments you get. I kind of see it more as this is what we value here in Singapore. We value respect, we value honour, we value family, we value citizen to citizen, and I think that promotion of values is actually kept safe or guarded by the consequences that come if that's not something people do. So I guess that it is something that deters people, but actually I feel like the focus isn't deterrent. The focus is actually respect and honour for the values that we are trying to keep and uphold here in Singapore. So I'm really interested in your thoughts about this, particularly because just the other day we took the kids for a day trip over to Malaysia, to Johor Bahru, and we were unfamiliar with JB. We don't know it very well. It's the first time we've ever been, and we are as parents, very aware of how safe Singapore is. And so when we were there was this moment where we went to take Aspen's photo, and she just left her bag on the floor in a fairly crowded area and whisked off to the place where she wanted to have a photo taken. And we were like, no, quickly go grab your bag, keep it on your back or keep it close to you. We don't know how safe it is here compared to home. And she just said, well, what do you mean? And so we explained, some people might not have respected our things as much as people here in Singapore. There's a real reputation that Singapore has for being safe, as I've mentioned already. And we didn't know if someone might just grab a bag and run off with it. And both her and Milo kind of looked at us and asked, well, why would someone do that? And it opened up this conversation that we weren't really ready to have, that we weren't aware that we needed to have, but to educate our children on the fact that there are people in the world who, for whatever reasons, whether they were desperate because of needing money, or of the thrill, or whatever it might be. It was a really interesting conversation. The innocence of our kids to just totally not understand, not get, not be aware of the fact that there's this whole life that some people lead that they're completely unaware of, that they have no idea why people might want to commit crimes. Actually, Milo, while we're talking about it, Milo asked me about graffiti. He saw just like an electricity box over in JB, which had people had kind of written their tags on it. And Milo said, well, why have people written all over that box? And I kind of found it a really difficult thing to explain. Well, some people might want to just write their tag or their mark on something to say that they've been there. And he was like, well, why? It doesn't belong to them. And it was hard. What do you explain to a 7-year-old or a 9-year-old the reasons behind tagging and graffiti? And then him asking, well, why don't people do it in Singapore? I said, well, we've got a culture of respect and honour, and if you do that, you get in trouble. So it was a really, really interesting conversation. It made me super aware of how fortunate I think we are here in Singapore to live in a culture where these things are, where people's property is really, really respected and honoured. Please do comment down below. Let me know what you think about safety, particularly what it is that makes Singapore safe, whether you've experienced safety here or whether you experienced not being safe in Singapore and not feeling safe in Singapore. We definitely have only experienced feeling safe here and not the opposite, but maybe it happens, maybe it's here and we're just not aware of it. The other thing is that this is a first part in maybe a 2 or 3 part discussion I'd like to have with you, and the second part is on the guys' side of things. Actually, it's got a slight twist to it. I want to discuss about dating here in Singapore. Not because I'm out to date, I'm definitely not. But we've heard some stories from girls who say it's notoriously difficult to date here in Singapore, and I wonder whether there is a connection between the culture here of safety and whether it is because of the way that guys are and how that all works. So I don't want to get into it, but we'll be discussing that on probably my next video. So do let me know. I'm really, really interested in your thoughts on this. Thank you very much for watching and listening to my rambles and my rants and my thoughts and the way that my mind kind of just connects things together. I hope you find it interesting. I hope that it's something that you can connect with and something that you can engage with. Again, I'd love your feedback. Please let me know below. Yeah, thank you for watching, and please subscribe, please like. It means a lot to me. Maybe share it if that's something that you'd like to do, and I hope to catch you here on my channel next time.